Cet ours pisse contre la croix. Il me fait mal de voir cela.
Il est ainsi, je le connais. Cet ours pisse contre la croix.
La figure du roi des rois y est pondue. C'est une chose bien exquise.
Là, qu'est-ce là? Cet ours pisse contre la croix. Il me fait mal de voir cela. Voici un miracle évident. Je ne sais comment on entend. Voici un miracle évident.
Voici un miracle évident. C'est une chose bien exquise.
Jean Molinet, Peter Heinz, Pierre Gringor, Matthijs de Kastelein, these authors may have been quite forgotten now and may not immediately ring a bell to the general public, but in the 15th and 16th century, these authors were widely celebrated for their works, both in France and in the Low Countries. Princes and kings gave them commissions, and the public from the courts and in town read their poems and their chronicles, and everyone wanted to see their theatre plays. These so-called rhetoricians and orators were important poets and writers. They were particularly active in Burgundy, an area that now covers parts of the Netherlands, Belgium and northern France. Rhetoricians mainly wrote texts based on historical and moral themes. They employed, for example, allegory, dreams and mythology. The rhetoricians and orators lived in turbulent times. From the 1450s onwards, the printing press spread within several decades to over 200 cities in a dozen European countries. The printing press was a real media revolution. Oral and written discourse acquired new means of circulation, thus earning a real power of action that could influence the public opinion. Moreover, this historical period is characterized by warfare, for example by the 100 Years' War. The struggle between England and France in the 14th and 15th century over the legitimate succession to the French crown. Finally, the Protestant Reformation, the 16th century political, religious, intellectual and cultural upheaval that splintered Catholic Europe, was something the rhetoricians were definitely familiar with. Who were these rhetoricians and what did they exactly do? How did they manage to keep up in these times of rapid changes? How did they express themselves? In short, we can identify the rhetoricians in different social contexts. They both operated in urban environments and in courts of dukes. In the latter, the French language and literature was the dominant influence in developing new poetic genres. In urban settings, however, rhetoricians appeared to express themselves in Dutch as well. The city was therefore a multilingual place. Especially the rise of the rhetoricians and the chambers of rhetoric in the Low Countries stimulated poetry and theatre in different languages. These rhetoricians also organized spectacular landjuwelen, country jewels, in which several chambers of rhetoric took part and had literary competitions. The rhetoricians and orators operationalized different new media channels that came with the invention of the printing press to influence the public opinion. Actually, nothing has really changed since then. Even today, those who want to influence the public use different social media to send out a message.
In the mid-15th century, Martin Lefranc gives us an early example of networks linking orators and rhetoricians. An orator and a poet, this is how Martin Lefranc was called by his friend, the future Pope Pius II, who was also a humanist. Martin Lefranc was born in Normandy, but he studied in Paris while the city was occupied by the Anglo-Burgundian troops during the 100 Years' War. This context may explain why Martin became a famous negotiator in both religious and secular matters during the turbulent times in which he lived. One of the big religious conflicts of the time was the so-called papal schism, where 2 rival popes were elected. As a secretary to the anti-pope Felix V, Martin travelled all over Europe. He was especially well known in the Burgundian Low Countries and in the Alps, since he was elected to a position in the municipality of the North Swiss city of Lausanne. It could be surprising for us that a diplomat would have time to write poetry. But Lefranc completed a long poem in 1442 called Le Champion des Dames. The book praises women. It is a reply to the attacks launched against them by Jean de Meun in the hugely popular Roman de la Rose, a true medieval bestseller written at the end of the 13th century. Misogyny has always been part of the clerical culture in the Middle Ages, but some people began to take issue with it at the beginning of the 15th century. Christine de Pizan, an influential female writer, initiated a debate still known today as the Debate of the Roman de la Rose. For Martin Lefranc, the Champion des Dames was an opportunity to express his views about the good and the evil use of public eloquence. Champion des Dames is an allegorical poem in which virtues and vices are personified by human characters. Free will, supported by virtuous ladies, opposes evil tongue and the members of a college of envy. Against its opponents, who embody slander, Free will praises the Burgundian chambers of rhetoric, where he says princes and dukes should go and learn to write and to speak in harmony in honor of peace and of a common good. The Grenoble Public Library holds a manuscript of the Champion des Dames, famous for its remarkable illustrations by a painter known as the Master of the Champion, who was active in Lille in the 1470s. The artist has underlined the disputes, opposing the characters with a dramatic use of colors. Free will is wearing a warm, pink, elegant costume, and the villains wear cold blue robes. Their gestures are depicted as if they were in a dance. Different perspectives emphasize the contrast between the stable rhetoric used by the defender of the ladies and the unstable false arguments of evil tongue. Martin Lefranc dedicated his work to the Duke of Burgundy, Philip the Good. But he quickly heard that the book was not well received. The prince and his courtiers had probably been outraged by Martin's satire against the Roman Church and by his praise of Joan of Arc. His praise of Joan of Arc must have displeased Philip, who had captured and sold her to her enemies. But Lefranc was a persistent man, and he sent a second copy to the court. We don't know Philip's reactions, but several noble families from Lille and the surrounding region took an interest and bought some copies of the work. One of them, the Grenoble manuscript, came back later to the Alps. The example of Martin Lefranc illustrates the common ground that existed between professional orators and the poets in the chambers of rhetoric in the 15th century. But his case also shows that the use of eloquence for political and social engagement could be tricky, since a patron, the first audience of a book, could always take offense of the ideas presented to him in a poem.
In the Low Countries, chambers of rhetoric expressed their views on religious, social, and political issues through regularly organized public events, such as rhetorical competitions. And the most famous of these is the 1561 Antwerp Landjuweel, which was a spectacular culmination of rhetoricians' culture. We know in remarkable detail what happened during this event due to a volume that was published 1 year after the competition. A copy of this work is kept at the library of the University of Utrecht. These 2 volumes bring together theatre plays that were performed by the chambers that participated in the competition in hopes of obtaining some of the prizes that could be won. Like most rhetoricians' events, the 1561 competition revolved around a central question, namely, what encourages mankind most to the arts? This question, which was communicated to the participating chambers in the printed invitation, had to be answered by them in their spel van zinnen, a type of morality play. By means of their theatrical answer to the central question, the chambers could provide their view on the place of the arts in society and thus impact public opinion. The Antwerp Landjuweel also contains a French connection. In the preface to the edition of the Landjuweel texts, the anonymous author expresses feelings of competition towards the ways in which France was able to flaunt its major authors, Clément Marot and Pierre de Ronsard. The text incites Netherlandish rhetoricians to follow the French example and have their productions printed in order to reach a broader audience. One of the chambers that participated in the 1561 festivities was the Flowering Vineyard, a chamber from Berchem, a small village near Antwerp. Its leading poet was Peter Heins, who was then still in his early 20s. In his daily life, Heins was at the head of a French school in Antwerp, where primarily Dutch-speaking girls were taught French as a second language. Heins acted as a go-between between the French and Dutch literary cultures of his time. He was one of the earliest poets who experimented with French verse forms in Dutch. Heins did not win any major prizes during the 1561 competition, but his bilingual oeuvre would mark the literary history of the Low Countries in the decades following the Antwerp competition.
The Van Gogh Utrecht Grenoble team aims to show that rhetoricians of northern France and the Low Countries share a special way of using eloquence spread through a huge number of various media, manuscripts, printed works, blazons, leaflets, and of course public performance, such as morality plays, rhetorical and satirical plays, or joyful festivities. The proliferating networks were able to question the profound changes taking place in the early modern European society, such as today's social media mirror as social and technical mutations. This area of research promises to become an innovative way of understanding both the early modern world and, undoubtedly, ours.
Ah, le bon roi, il a soutenu la police, il a observé la justice. Honnêtement, selon la loi, droit et raison.
Ah, le bon roi, toute l'Église militante a été docte et florissante, paisible, vivant à Roquois durant son temps.
Ah, le bon roi, il supportait bourgeois, marchands, même les laboureurs des champs, punissant gens pleins des rois, pillards.
Ah, le bon roi, simple ignorant supporté, pauvre mendiant conforté, observant de Jésus la foi, redoutant Dieu.
Ah, le bon roi, à sa mort n'avant nul profit. Dieu doit que Philippe, son fils, soit ainsi que lui libéra.